How can a man go from paying his daughter's rent to being told he's no longer needed the moment money shows up? How can a single lottery ticket erase 30 years of sacrifice, unless his name is the only one the lottery office recognizes? This is how I watched my daughter and her husband celebrate their win, while forgetting who actually owned the ticket. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is David Miller, and I am 61 years old. I live alone in a small bungalow on the edge of our town. It is not fancy. The carpet is old, the sofa is older, and the TV is the one thing in the room that looks younger than me. But it is quiet, it is paid off, and it holds almost every good memory I have left. Every Saturday night I have the same little ritual. I order cheap takeout from the Chinese place down the street. I sit in my armchair, I put the lottery channel on, and I take out one small slip of paper from my wallet. It is just a lottery ticket, bought for a few dollars at the neighborhood convenience store. Same place every time, same numbers every time. I know them by heart now, but I still check them twice when I fill in the form. It started years ago, as a joke with my wife. After she died, it just became something I did for myself. A few years back, my daughter Emily and her husband Tyler started coming over on drawing nights. At first, it felt nice. They were young, broke, and stressed. The lottery show was a break for them. We would eat, talk about their week, and laugh about what we would do if we ever hit the big one. It was all pretend then. Nobody really thought it would happen. On the night this story begins, I did the same things I always do. I came home from the warehouse, I put my lunchbox on the counter, I fed the neighbor's cat that likes to hang around my back door. Then I went to the kitchen table and took my wallet out. The ticket was in a neat little plastic sleeve I use so it does not get bent. I checked the numbers, same ones, the birth dates, the anniversary, and a couple of random digits that my wife once said felt lucky. I smiled at that. I turned the ticket over and looked at the back. My name was there in my own thin, careful handwriting. I had signed it right after buying it, like I always do. Habit. I put it back in my wallet and heard my phone buzz. Oh, it was a text from Emily. She said they were running late, but that they would be there before the drawing. She added a little joke about how I should not eat all the egg rolls before they arrived. I texted back that I would try my best. By 7:30, the TV was on, and the food was on the coffee table. The room smelled like fried rice and soy sauce. The lottery host was doing the usual talk. I sat down, checked the time, and heard a car pull up outside. A minute later, my front door opened, and Emily stepped in first, her coat already half off. She looked tired, but excited. Tyler followed behind her, still tapping on his phone. They said hello. Emily gave me a quick hug. Tyler gave me a nod and looked straight at the food. Emily joked that I was predictable and said it was nice that some things never changed. Tyler laughed and called it my old man TV night. He said it in a light tone, but there was that small, sharp edge I have learned to notice. They sat down. Emily filled her plate and started talking fast about some drama at work. Tyler spoke about a deal he almost closed at the dealership and how the customer wasted his time by backing out. I listened, as I always do. That is something older parents do a lot. We listen. When the lottery music started playing, Emily reached out and snatched the ticket from the coffee table. I must have set it down without thinking. She waved it like a flag and grinned. Tyler leaned over to look. He said it was their lucky night. He could feel it. He said it in a half-joking way, but he said "there" like it was natural. I did not correct him. I just reached for the remote and turned the volume up. The numbers started coming. The first ball dropped. I heard the host read it. It matched. I frowned and checked the ticket in Emily's hand. There it was, the same number. I thought it was a funny coincidence. It had happened before with one number, never with the second, though. The second ball dropped. The host read the number slowly. It matched too. By the third number, my heart began to beat a little harder. Emily had gone quiet. Tyler leaned in closer, and I saw his eyes change. The fourth ball dropped, then the fifth. Every number matched. Even the final special number at the end matched. I have never heard silence like the silence in that living room after the last number was read. Emily's mouth was open. She stared at the ticket. Tyler said nothing for a long few seconds. Then he suddenly shouted that this was it. They had done it. They had finally made it. He jumped up from the couch and nearly knocked over the takeout cartons. Emily said it was impossible, then repeated the numbers out loud, comparing them to the ones written on the paper over and over again. Her hands shook. She started laughing and crying at the same time. Tyler grabbed her and spun her around in the small space between the coffee table and the TV. For a moment, I just sat there. My hands were on the arms of my old chair, and I could actually feel the rough fabric under my fingers. The sound of the TV faded. All I could hear was Emily's voice, high and wild. saying that everything was going to change, that they were finally free. Tyler looked at me then. He said that this was our big night, but when he repeated it, he did not say our. He said it was theirs. He talked about how life had been so hard on them and how they deserved a break. Emily, breathless, said that now they would not need to ask me for help anymore. She said I would not have to keep bailing them out. She said it like she was giving me a gift. I smiled, a small tight thing. I asked if she was sure she did not want any more help. I asked it as a joke, but she took it seriously. She said it was time for them to stand on their own feet, and that this win meant they could set some healthy boundaries as a couple. Tyler nodded quickly at that. He said young couples need space, and that it was not good for them to always rely on a parent. He added that, of course, they would take care of me, but that it was time for them to live their own life. He did not say it with kindness. He said it like someone who finally stepped out of a shadow. Emily turned to him and asked if they should tell everyone now or wait until tomorrow. Tyler said they needed to celebrate properly. He suggested we all go out to a restaurant, his treat. He said they could start planning how to use their money. He reached for the ticket in Emily's hand. She passed it to him like it already belonged to him. He tucked it into his jacket pocket without even looking at me. That was the first time I cleared my throat. I told him I should hold on to it. I said it softly. I said I had a safe spot at home and that I knew how these things worked. I reminded them that the lottery might ask for the original ticket. Tyler made a small face and said I worried too much. He said nothing bad would happen to it in his pocket. Emily looked from him to me and back again. Then she gave a little sigh and asked Tyler to just let me hold it until we had talked to the lottery office. He did not like that. I saw it in his jaw, but he forced a smile and took the ticket back out. He laid it on the table in front of me like someone placing a tip in front of a waiter. I picked it up and slid it into my wallet. My hands were steady. We drove to a family-style restaurant 10 minutes away, the kind with old photos on the walls and sticky menus. Tyler walked in ahead with his arm around Emily. I walked behind them. They greeted the host. Emily told her we were celebrating something big. The host smiled and led us to a booth near the middle of the room. Other tables were full of parents, kids, people on dates. Normal Saturday night noise filled the air. Once we sat down, Tyler started talking faster and louder. He told Emily they would have to move. He said their apartment was too small for lottery winners. He started listing cars and trips in a voice that carried to the next table. Emily talked about quitting her job. She said she had always dreamed of going back to school or starting some kind of business. She said this was their chance to do it without worrying about bills. I listened, like I always do. Then I opened my mouth and said we should be careful. I suggested they wait until the money was really in hand before they made big promises to bosses or landlords. I said tax people and lawyers might be a good idea. They both went quiet for a second. Tyler looked at me and laughed. He said I was already making it stressful. He said maybe this was why he and Emily needed some distance, because I always brought poor thinking into things. Emily did not correct him. She just kind of smiled in that way people do when they are embarrassed. The waitress came and took our orders. Tyler told her we were celebrating. He said we had just won the lottery. He announced it with a grin that showed every tooth. The waitress congratulated him and glanced at Emily, assuming the win was theirs. I sat there and watched the misunderstanding grow like a small, smooth stone rolling downhill. While we waited for the food, Tyler leaned back and said that now they could set some rules with family. He said he loved me, but that he and Emily needed to be clear that they were their own unit. He said there would be no more surprise visits, no more last-minute babysitting, no more financial mix-ups. He spoke like a manager setting new policy. Emily agreed. She said they had to think about their future kids and the image they wanted to give them. She said they did not want to raise them in my neighborhood. She said, carefully, that she did not want them to grow up thinking they had to live like I do. I felt that one. It was not loud, but it was sharp. I asked, quiet, if they were sure this was how they wanted to talk to me on the same night that I bought the ticket that changed their life. I kept my voice level. Tyler shrugged and said that the numbers were theirs. He said they had talked about them many times as a couple, years ago. He said I just happened to be the one who handed the slip to the cashier this time. He said, of course, I would get something, but that the money was clearly meant for them. The tables nearby had fallen almost silent. A couple with 2 kids in the next booth kept their eyes on their plates, but I could see their ears turned toward us. The waitress walked by slowly, pretending to wipe a table that was already clean. Emily told me not to make it awkward. She said I should be happy for them and not act like they owed me anything. She used that word, owed. She said I had done more than enough as a father and that now I could relax and not worry about them. I breathed in and out, once. I did not shout. I did not cry. I just sat there and listened to my only child explain, in a gentle voice that I was no longer needed, now that her life was finally starting. When the food came, no one touched it for a minute. Tyler finally raised his glass of soda and said this was to their new life. He did not include me in the phrase. Emily clinked her glass with his. My phone, which was on the table next to my plate, buzzed then. The screen lit up with a notification from the state lottery app. The words were simple. It congratulated the ticket purchaser on matching the jackpot numbers and told them to contact the commission directly. The light from the screen glowed on my wallet, where the ticket with my name on it lay folded and safe. I stared at the bright message on my phone for a long moment. It used the same simple phrase they always use for winners. It congratulated the ticket purchaser. It told that person, very clearly, to contact the lottery commission directly. My son-in-law kept talking about houses and cars. My daughter kept talking about freedom and new boundaries. The waitress kept walking by with a careful face. The words on my phone and the little buzz from the app felt like something only I could hear. I locked my screen and slid the phone face down next to my plate. I did not say anything. I let them finish their celebration. I let Tyler talk big about what he would tell his boss on Monday, how he would walk into that office like a king. I let Emily talk about how she would resign from her job, how she would write some dramatic email saying she was done with all of them. Every time I tried to suggest waiting until the money was in the bank, Tyler brushed it off. He said I thought too small. He said this was a new chapter and that thinking like an employee would only hold them back. Emily agreed. She said they deserved it. Later, in the parking lot, Tyler tried again to get the ticket from me. He said the winner should be the one holding it. He meant himself. I told him the ticket was safe with me, at least until we talked to the people at the lottery. I kept my voice calm. He looked annoyed, but he did not push it further in front of Emily. They drove off, music already loud in their car. I drove home in silence. In the quiet of my living room, I sat down and took the ticket out again. The numbers were still there. My signature was still on the back. I placed it inside a small fireproof box I kept hidden behind some old books. I had never actually needed that box before. It had always held only the deeds to the house, my wife's death certificate, and a few family papers. Now it held something that made my stomach feel tight. I did not sleep much that night. When I did drift off, it was not the restaurant conversation that replayed in my head. It was every time I had pulled Emily out of a hole, every time I had found a way when she thought there was none. In the morning, I put on my steel-toe boots and my faded work jacket, like every other day. The lottery world moved on without me for a few hours. At 5 a.m, nobody at the warehouse was talking about tickets or jackpots. They were talking about pallets, deadlines, and a shipment that arrived late. The loading bay was cold. My breath came out in small white clouds. One of the younger guys, Marcus, called out to ask if I could check a stack of incoming boxes. He said he trusted my eyes more than the scanner. It was a joke, but it was also true. I had been there longer than most of them. I knew the place by feel. My supervisor, a man 10 years younger than me, came over with a clipboard. He asked for my opinion on rearranging the shift schedule to meet a new contract. He listened when I spoke. He took notes. When he walked away, he told Marcus that if I said something, they should follow it. It always feels strange when strangers respect you more than your own family. On break, I sat at the small round table in the corner of the break room. The coffee machine made its usual rattling sound. People talked about sports, weather, and the cost of groceries. The news on the little TV in the corner showed a headline about a local lottery winner, without a name yet. Marcus glanced at the TV and joked that I should start playing more, since I worked so much. I told him I already did. I told him it was just a habit I had. He laughed and said that if anyone deserved to get lucky, it was probably me. He said I had carried that place on my back for years. I thought back to the first time I really carried anyone on my back. It was not a pallet. It was my daughter. She was 23 then, fresh out of college, trying to prove that she and Tyler could make it without any help. They got a tiny apartment with peeling paint and thin walls. They posted photos online like it was some romantic bohemian start. Inside, the pipes were bad and the rent was high. One evening, Emily called me. Her voice was small. She said they had gotten an eviction notice. She said she thought they could handle the bills, but something went wrong. She did not understand the late fees, the interest, the penalties. Tyler was angry and ashamed. They had no savings. I remember driving over there late with a folder of bank papers in the passenger seat. The building smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. Their door had a piece of paper taped to it with big red letters. Emily cried when she opened the door and hugged me like she was still a child. Tyler stood back with his arms crossed. He let me read the notice. When I said I would cover the 3 months they owed and talk to the landlord, he let out a breath of relief. He told me they would pay me back as soon as his commissions picked up. He believed it when he said it. Time went by. The money never came back. I co-signed a new lease so they would not be thrown out. I knew it was a bad idea, but I could not watch my daughter sleep in her car. I told myself it was temporary. That is a word parents use a lot when they are afraid to say forever. A few years later, there was the car. Their old one broke down on the highway. Emily called from the side of the road. She said they needed help with a down payment on a replacement. Tyler said he had found a great deal, but they just needed a little boost. I used my savings to cover most of the down payment. He said again that he would pay me back when things got better at work. The biggest time, though, was the wedding. Emily wanted a simple ceremony at first. That was what she told me. Then Tyler's parents got involved. They wanted a bigger venue, nicer decorations, better catering. They had the money for their part. Emily did not want to look cheap next to them. She did not want her side of the family to seem less. I remember sitting in a small office at the venue with a manager who pushed a contract across the desk. The final payment was due soon. Some unexpected costs had popped up. Emily had not planned for them. Tyler's parents said they would cover their agreed share and no more. There was a gap. Emily looked at me with those eyes that had once begged for ice cream and bedtime stories. She said they would handle it if they had more time. The manager shook her head and said there was no more time. So I wrote a check. The ink was barely dry when the manager smiled and said everything was taken care of. At the reception, people toasted the happy couple. Tyler's parents received praise for their help with the wedding. I sat beside an empty chair where my late wife should have been. Nobody mentioned the check I wrote. That was fine. Parents do not do it for applause. After the wedding, life did not get easier for them like they thought it would. Bills came, jobs changed, the economy did its usual thing. They called me when they were short on rent, short on groceries, short on anything. I always found a way. Sometimes it was money, sometimes it was time. I watched their little girl, my granddaughter, so they could work extra shifts. I fixed broken things in their apartment. I drove them to appointments when their car was in the shop. Over the years, something else grew in the spaces between those favors. Embarrassment. When I visited, Tyler sometimes teased me about my old car or my clothes. Emily would roll her eyes at him, but she did not really contradict him. When they talked about their plans in front of their friends or Tyler's family, they used words like self-made and independent. They said they had built their life from nothing. They never added that they built it on top of my overtime hours and my savings account. The first time I met Tyler's parents, they were polite but distant. They wore brand-name clothes and lived in a nicer neighborhood. At dinner, Tyler's mother made a small joke that I must be glad they were helping take care of Emily now. The way she said it, it sounded like she thought I had been a burden on my own daughter. I did not correct her. Emily did not either. Time moved like that. I became a background figure in their story, useful when needed, invisible when not. I did not tell anyone at the warehouse about the big win that morning. I did not tell Marcus. I did not tell my supervisor. It felt too raw and too strange. I needed to understand how I felt first. I needed to remember who I had been before that set of numbers rolled down a screen. On my lunch break, sitting in the break room with a simple sandwich, I checked my phone. Emily had not called since the night before. There were no missed calls from Tyler either. There were only a few new messages from coworkers and some junk mail. I looked at an old contact in my phone. Rachel Eng? She was my lawyer. I had met her years ago when I needed help after my wife died. She helped me sort out life insurance, the house, and some other paperwork I did not understand at the time. Back then, she told me something that stuck in my mind. She said family can be kind until money appears, and that it is better to write things down before that happens. We drafted a simple will and a strange little document about what to do if I ever had a windfall, like an inheritance or a prize. I had almost forgotten about it. After my shift, I drove home feeling heavier than I had in a long time. I sat at my kitchen table, my lunchbox still in front of me, and took out my phone again. I opened the family group chat. It was usually quiet. Sometimes I posted photos of my granddaughter when I took her to the park. Sometimes Emily posted memes. Tyler almost never wrote there. Now there was a new message at the bottom. It was from Emily, sent about an hour earlier. I opened it. It was a photo of Emily and Tyler standing in their living room. Emily held the lottery ticket up between them like a trophy. Tyler had his arm wrapped around her shoulders and a beer in his other hand. They were both grinning wide. Behind them, their TV showed a replay of last night's drawing. Under the picture, Emily had written a caption. She said this was their big break. She said it was time for their life to finally begin. There was no mention of me. I sat there and let the screen light my face. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I did not type anything back. I did not answer the group chat message. I set the phone down and stared at the wall for a while. The house was very quiet. I could hear the small ticking sound of the old clock in the hallway. It felt like every second was asking me a question I did not know how to answer. After a few minutes, I put on my coat and stepped outside. The air was cool, with that damp feeling that comes just before rain. I did not have a plan. I just knew I could not sit at the table and look at that picture anymore, the one where my ticket was in their hands and my name was nowhere in the caption. I started walking. My feet took me toward the little park a few blocks away. It was a simple place, a few benches, some trees, a small playground. When my granddaughter was smaller, I used to push her on the swing there while Emily checked her phone and Tyler talked about sales numbers. Now the park was almost empty. There was only an older man walking his dog in slow circles and a couple of teenagers on a bench sharing headphones. I sat on the far end of another bench and leaned back. The wood felt rough under my shoulders. I thought about the restaurant the night before. I tried to hear Emily's voice in a kinder way, to tell myself she had just been excited. But when I replayed the words, they did not soften. She had said they did not need my help anymore. They needed distance. They needed to protect their image for future children who should not see my kind of life. I thought about every time she had called me in tears. I thought about the first time she stood on a stage in a school play and how proud I had been. I thought about my wife, who would have known what to say now, and how she was not here to say it. At some point on that bench, something changed inside me. It was not loud. It was not a burst of anger. It was like a switch being flipped in a quiet room. It was a thought that came and sat beside me, very simple and very clear. The thought said that they did not see me as a father anymore. They saw me as a tool they could put away now that they thought they had a better one. The thought also said that I had agreed to this role for too long. I sat with that for a while. Then I took my phone out again and looked at the lottery app. The message was still there, congratulating the ticket purchaser and giving a phone number to call. I scrolled past it and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered over Rachel's name for a second, then moved past it. Not yet. I did not want to speak to a lawyer while my chest still felt like it was cracking. Instead, I slid the phone back into my pocket and stood up. I walked out of the park and headed toward the small shopping strip where the Alvarez convenience store sat at the corner. The bell above the door rang when I stepped inside. The place smelled like coffee, dust, and candy. I had been going there for years. Tom Alvarez stood behind the counter, reading something on his tablet. His wife, Rosa, was stocking a shelf with bags of chips. Tom looked up and smiled when he saw me. He said it was good to see me again so soon and asked if I was there for my usual ticket. His voice was light. He did not know yet. I walked up to the counter and told him, in a low voice, that the numbers had hit. At first he did not understand. Then he opened the app on his own phone and looked at the winning numbers. His eyes grew wide. He asked if it was my line. I nodded. I told him that the ticket I bought there, the one on my loyalty card, had all the numbers. He let out a breath and called Rosa over. She put down the chips and asked what was going on. When he told her, she clapped a hand to her mouth and then hugged me over the counter. Tom asked if I had called the lottery yet. I said I had not. I could hear how strange that sounded. Most people would have been on the phone the second the drawing ended. I told him I wanted to understand everything first, and that there were some problems with my family. He looked at me in that careful way people do when they are not sure how to respond. Then he said something simple. He said that no matter what my family argued, he knew who had pulled out his wallet in front of that counter and paid for that ticket. He knew whose loyalty card beeped in his system. He knew whose name was printed on the receipt. He said he remembered that night clear as day. He had even joked with me when he rang it up. I asked if his system really kept all of that. He nodded and turned the screen around. He typed in the date and the last digits of the ticket's serial number, which I read from my picture of the ticket. The record popped up. It showed the time, my name from the loyalty card, the amount, and the ticket number. There was even an option for printing a duplicate receipt. Tom also pointed up toward the corners of the store, where small cameras sat. He said the footage from that night would show me standing there alone at the counter, filling out the slip, paying, and putting the ticket in my wallet. He said the cameras did not lie. He said if the lottery people or my lawyer ever needed proof, he would tell them exactly what he saw. Rosa stepped closer and told me in a soft voice that I looked tired. She said something must be wrong if I did not seem happy about such good news. I told her that my daughter and her husband were already talking as if it was only their win and that they had said some very hard things to me in the restaurant. I did not repeat every word. It felt too heavy to say out loud. She shook her head and said, "Families sometimes lost their minds over money." She said people showed their real hearts when big numbers appeared. She squeezed my hand over the counter and said I should not let anyone bully me into giving away what was mine. I thanked them both and left the store. As I walked out, I glanced up at the camera near the door. The small red light blinked. It felt like an eye that had seen all the important parts of the story long before I knew it would be a story. That evening, Emily sent me a message asking if I wanted to join her and Tyler at a rooftop bar downtown. She said they were doing a small celebration with friends and that I should come if I wanted to see them before things got busy. She added a laughing face, like she was talking about a fun little party, and not a turning point in our lives. I did not want to go. Every part of me wanted to stay home and lock the door. But something in me also knew I needed to see them like that, in the open, where I could hear what they said when they thought everything was already decided. So I put on my cleanest shirt and my old blazer, the one I had worn to Emily's wedding, and drove downtown. The rooftop bar was one of those slick places with glass railings, trendy lights, and music that is not quite loud enough to call noise, but loud enough to make real talk difficult. Young people in nice clothes stood around with cocktails and thin glasses, laughing in tight little circles. I spotted Emily and Tyler near the edge of the roof. They were surrounded by a small group of friends. Tyler was in the middle of describing something with big hand gestures. When he saw me, he lifted his chin in greeting. Emily waved me over. When I reached them, Emily introduced me to everyone as her dad. One of Tyler's friends smiled politely and said he had heard a lot about me. Another one asked if I was excited about the win. I noticed that everyone was looking at Emily and Tyler when they said the word win, not at me. Tyler started telling the story of how the numbers came up. He said he and Emily had picked them together years ago, that the numbers had a special meaning for them as a couple. He talked about how they had always known that if the ticket hit, it would change their life. He did not mention that I was the one who had always paid for those lines. He did not mention the little plastic sleeve in my wallet or the way I signed the back each time. In his version, the ticket had been born from their love and hard work, as if it had written itself and jumped into their hands. At one point, someone asked about me. They wanted to know what I would do now. Tyler answered before I could open my mouth. He said I would finally be able to relax and not stress about bills. He said they would make sure I was all right, as long as I did not make things complicated. He said this with a little laugh, and everyone else laughed too. Emily glanced at me with something like apology in her eyes, but she did not correct him. She just nodded and added that they would help me out when they could, but that they needed to focus on their future and their own little family first. She said they had been too dependent on me and that it had not been healthy. As I listened, I felt that quiet switch in me click again, a second time, a little deeper. I realized that even in public, in front of people who did not know our history, they were drawing a line. On one side, there was their new life, their success, their story. On the other side, there was me, a side character who should accept whatever came his way and be grateful. I did not argue. I told myself that arguing in front of their friends would only make me look like the bitter, old, small man they seemed to think I was. So I just nodded and smiled and let the conversation flow around me. After a while, Tyler leaned close and spoke in a low voice that only I could hear. He said he hoped I would not make trouble with the ticket. He said everyone understood that it was really their win and that I should not stand in the way of their plans. He added that people would think it was strange if an older man tried to hold on to a young couple's chance at a new life. I looked at him and felt something inside me go very still. I told him, in that same low tone, that I did not want to stand in the way of any honest plans. I also said I would be handling the boring part with the lottery, since I was the one who had bought and signed the ticket, and that we could talk about details after the officials had explained everything. He frowned, but the music started to swell, and someone pulled him back into the circle to talk about houses again. I stepped away and moved toward a quieter corner near the stairs. I took my phone out and opened my contacts. This time I did not skip over Rachel's name. I tapped it. The phone rang twice before she picked up. I walked down the stairs to the lower landing so I could hear her better. I told her there had been a change in my life and that I needed to talk about that old windfall document. I did not give every detail. I just said my family was already acting like I did not exist. She listened and told me to come by her office in a few days. She said we would look at everything together, check what the lottery rules said, and make sure my name and rights were clear before anyone else tried to claim them. Her voice was calm. It helped. After the call ended, I opened the calendar app on my phone and created a new event on the date she had given me. I named it simply Meeting Lottery. Rachel. When I got home that night, I went straight to the fireproof box. I took out the ticket and laid it on the table under the kitchen light. I looked at the front for a long time, at the numbers and the logo, and then flipped it over. My name sat on the back in thin blue ink. It was a little shaky from my old hands, but it was there. I traced the letters lightly with my finger, then I slid the ticket back into its sleeve, put it in the box, and closed the lid with a soft click. On the screen of my phone, the little calendar reminder sat quietly, waiting. The days after that rooftop night felt strange. On the outside, my life looked the same. I still woke up before dawn. I still put on my work clothes and made coffee in the same old machine. I still drove the same route to the warehouse. But under all of that, something had shifted. There was a quiet line now, and I knew it was there even if nobody else saw it. I went back to the Alvarez store first, before I did anything official. I wanted to be sure that what Tom had shown me once was not some fog in my memory. That morning, the sky was gray. The bell above the convenience store door rang when I stepped in, and the smell of coffee hit me again. Tom stood behind the counter, going through a stack of lottery forms. Rosa was at the back, checking dates on milk cartons. Tom looked up and smiled. He said he had been wondering when I would come back and asked in his easy voice if I had called the lottery yet. I told him I was on my way to doing that, but that I wanted to take one more look at the record from the night of the purchase. He nodded and turned his screen toward me without hesitation. He went into the same menu as before, typing in the date and some numbers. The transaction popped up on the screen again, just like it had the first time. My name from the loyalty card appeared. The timestamp glowed in small numbers. The serial number matched the one in the photo on my phone. He asked if I needed a printout. I said I would not mind having one, just in case. He hit a button, and a small printer under the counter spat out a narrow strip of paper. He tore it off and handed it to me. I did not read every line. I just folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket. Rosa came over when she saw us talking. She asked in a soft voice if my daughter had calmed down or if things were still tense. I told her that my daughter and son-in-law were acting like the money was already in their hands and that they were making plans without waiting for anything official. I said they were talking about cutting me out as if I were a problem to solve. Rosa shook her head and said some people changed when they smelled money, and that sometimes the people who changed the most were the ones who had needed you the hardest before. She told me not to forget that I had bought the ticket and that I had the right to protect myself. I felt odd hearing that kind of defense from someone who was almost a stranger while my own child stayed silent. From the store, I drove to Rachel's office. Her building was not fancy, just a low brick structure with a small plaque by the door. Inside, the waiting room was quiet. A receptionist at the desk greeted me and asked me to sit for a few minutes. While I waited, I looked around at the framed certificates on the wall. Most of them had Rachel's name on them, with different dates and seals. I remembered sitting in that same chair years before, after my wife died, feeling lost and numb. Back then, Rachel had walked me through everything step by step. She had been patient. She had explained words like probate and beneficiary until they stopped sounding like a foreign language. When she came out to get me this time, she looked exactly the same. Calm, neat, a little tired in the eyes, but steady. She led me into her office and closed the door. I told her the whole story. I started with the habit of buying tickets, the numbers, the night of the drawing. I told her about Emily and Tyler at my house, about the restaurant, about the rooftop bar, about the group chat photo. I did not raise my voice. I just laid the events in order, like boxes on a pallet. She listened without interrupting much. Sometimes she asked a small question, like whether I had signed the back of the ticket and where I kept it now. I told her it was signed and in a fireproof box in my house. I told her I had a printed store receipt and that Tom and Rosa would back me up if asked. She opened a lower drawer of her desk and took out a plain folder with my name on it. Inside it were the papers from years earlier. She flipped through them until she found the simple will and the windfall document. She reminded me of the language we had agreed on back then. It said that if I ever got a large sum of money from a prize or gift, I would put it into a structure that protected it from pressure and made sure it was used how I wanted. She said the law in our state was clear about lottery tickets. Whoever bought the ticket, signed it, and presented it to the commission was the legal winner. She said other people could claim they had an agreement, but the system would look first and last at the ticket itself and the records around it. She asked if Emily or Tyler had paid for the ticket in any way. I told her that they never had. I said I had always used my own cash or card. She nodded and wrote a few notes on a pad. Then she said something very simple. She said that, in the eyes of the law, the prize was mine. What I chose to do after that was my decision. She said I could give every penny to my daughter and her husband if I wished, or I could give them nothing or anything in between. But that choice would be mine, not theirs. Hearing those words out loud did not make me happy. It made me feel like I had been walking a tightrope, and suddenly someone told me there was a net underneath, but I still had to decide where to step. Rachel suggested that, before the official public announcement, I should contact the lottery office and start the claim process formally. She said we could also update the old windfall document into a stronger structure, such as a trust, but that would take a little time and a visit to the bank. She asked if I was ready to bring my daughter into those talks. I said I was not. I told her that right now they were talking like they did not need me at all, and that I wanted to understand my position fully before revealing anything. She did not judge that. She simply said it was wise to know the rules of the game before telling the other players that there was even a game on. After we talked, she picked up her phone and called a contact at the regional office of the lottery. She introduced herself and then handed me the phone when a clerk was ready to speak. The clerk asked me for basic details, my name, address, phone number, the serial number off the ticket. I gave them calmly. I did not mention my daughter or Tyler. The clerk explained that for big prizes, claimants often came to the office in person with identification and the ticket, or at least strong proof, before the full handover. He offered me a time later that week to come in, bring whatever I had, and speak to a senior staff member. I agreed and wrote the appointment time down. 2 days later, I walked into the regional lottery office. It was not glamorous. It looked like any government building. Pale walls, plastic chairs, a number machine on a small stand. People sat quietly waiting for their turn. When my number was called, I went up to a window. A woman behind the glass asked my name and checked something on her computer. Then she asked me to wait for a moment. After a few minutes, a different staff member came out and invited me into a small office in the back. He asked to see my ID and any record I had. I took out my driver's license, the folded store receipt Tom had printed, and a printed screenshot of the lottery app message linked to my account. I did not bring the actual ticket. I told him it was in a safe place at home. He studied the items and typed into his computer. He said that the system already showed a likely match between the winning numbers and my registered account, which I had made years earlier to check results online. He said the purchase location and time matched what I had told him. He also said that ultimately the physical ticket would be needed, but that these steps were enough to begin the internal process. He then explained the rest in a flat, professional tone. There would be verification, paperwork, tax forms, and options about lump sum or annuity. If I wanted, I could choose to keep my identity private from the public in most settings, but for the press, there would likely be some level of announcement. He asked if I had thought about who I wanted to appear with me if I chose a public ceremony. I thought about Emily and Tyler posing with the ticket in their living room, writing that caption in the group chat. I thought about the restaurant, the rooftop bar, the way he had warned me not to make trouble with the ticket, the way she had talked about moving away from my life like it was something to escape. I told the staff member that I did not know yet who would be there. I said I needed time to think. He nodded and said that was fine, that nothing was decided that day. He handed me a sealed envelope with some information and forms. I could feel the weight of the paper even through the thin cardboard. I did not open it in the office. On my way back to the car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily. She asked if I wanted to come with them to a car dealership that weekend. She said they were going to look at new vehicles, something that would fit their new life, and that they thought I should see what they were planning. I stared at the message for a minute. Then I wrote back that I would come. The dealership was shiny and bright, with smooth floors and cars lined up under bright lights. Salespeople in clean shirts moved like friendly sharks through the showroom. Emily and Tyler were already there when I arrived. Emily wore a new dress I had not seen before. Tyler looked like he had stepped out of one of their own advertisements. A salesman greeted them by name and spoke about options as if everything was already certain. Tyler talked about a luxury SUV for them and possibly a sports car for weekends. He described colors and trims. Emily laughed and talked about how their kids would look in the back seat of something bigger and better. I walked beside them and listened. When the salesman left them alone for a moment to check availability, I suggested, in a calm voice, that they wait until the money was actually in their account before signing anything. I reminded them about taxes and paperwork. I said the lottery process could take time. Tyler's smile thinned. He said I worried too much and that I was thinking like a man who had always lived paycheck to paycheck. He said they had to act like winners now if they wanted to feel like winners later. He mentioned that the dealership would hold the cars with just a small deposit and that his credit would cover anything until the check came. Emily added that they had told their friends about their plans and that it would be embarrassing to back down now. She said people would think they had been lying about the win. She said it was not a big deal to start the process early. I reminded them again that nothing was final yet, that not a single dollar had arrived. Tyler waved a hand and said the ticket was secure and that everyone knew it was theirs. He said the lottery could not change that. He made it sound like I was holding them back out of some old fear, not out of experience. As I stood there between the polished cars and the bright lights, I felt small and out of place. At the same time, there was a quiet, steady feeling growing under that. It was the knowledge that whatever story they told their friends and the salesman did not change the record at the Alvarez store, the ink on the back of the ticket, the account in the lottery system, or the folder in Rachel's office. Later that week, after another shift at the warehouse, I went back to Rachel's office. We sat together at her desk, and she spread out several documents on the surface. She said we would need to update some things and think about how I wanted to handle the prize if and when it was paid. I did not read every word of those papers. I just watched her pen move as she marked places where my signature would go in the future. She said we could involve the bank soon to set up something more solid than a piece of paper in a drawer. She promised to make sure the structure would do what I wanted, not what anyone else demanded at the last minute. When our talk ended, she called her assistant in and handed over a stack of forms with my name and the ticket's serial number written neatly at the top. The assistant carried them to a large copier in the hallway. As I stepped out of the office and pulled the door gently closed behind me, I heard the copier wake up. Its light flickered on, and the machine began to hum. Pages slid through with a soft, steady rhythm, each one carrying my name and the numbers that had turned my family upside down. The next week felt longer than any week I could remember. On the surface, nothing huge happened. I still went to work. I still drank my coffee in the same chipped mug. I still checked that the front door was locked twice every night, but every hour carried a new small step that pushed things forward, even if nobody else knew it. Rachel called one morning while I was on my first break at the warehouse. I stepped outside to answer. The air smelled like diesel and cold metal. She said the lottery office had finished their first checks. She said everything they had on file matched my information. She told me they wanted to schedule a press event for later in the month. There would be cameras, a short ceremony, maybe a big fake check if I agreed to it. She asked if I still wanted to move ahead. I told her that I did. My voice was steady when I said it. She also said it was time to go to the bank. The small windfall paper we had made years ago was fine for a surprise bonus or a small inheritance. It was not enough for this. She suggested we build something stronger and cleaner, something that would stand between the money and anyone who tried to pull at it with bare hands. After work that day, I did not go home. I drove straight to the bank branch where I kept my checking account. It was a building I had been in many times, but always just to deposit a paycheck or ask about some small fee. This time, the lady at the front desk greeted me by name and then asked me to wait in a separate area. Rachel met me there a few minutes later, carrying a dark folder and a calm expression. We sat in a glass-walled conference room with a long table. Outside, people walked past on their way to the ATMs, unaware of anything unusual. Inside, the air was still. A bank officer joined us, a man with careful hair and a tie that looked more expensive than my whole outfit. He shook my hand and used my full name, the way people do when they want you to feel the weight of your own signature. Rachel started by explaining, in simple terms, what we were doing. She said we were not just talking about a pile of money. We were talking about how that pile would be guarded, who would be allowed near it, and under what rules. She said this was my chance to decide those rules while my head was clear and before pressure came from outside. They had already done some preparation. There were papers on the table with tabs and little sticky notes. My name appeared over and over again. There were also blank spaces waiting for my hand. The bank officer asked about my goals. He asked if I wanted security for myself, help for my family, gifts for anyone else. He spoke in that measured way that made everything sound like an option on a menu. I did not answer right away. I thought about my small house, my aching back, the years I had spent climbing in and out of trucks. I thought about future hospital bills and the way prices seemed to climb faster every year. I thought about my granddaughter's bright eyes when she talked about school. I also thought about the restaurant, the rooftop bar, the way my daughter had said she did not want her children to grow up with my kind of life. So I told them this. I wanted to make sure I would not be a burden on anyone when I was old. I wanted any grandchildren to have a chance at education without begging banks. I wanted to give something small to the community that had carried me all these years. And I wanted to keep the money out of the hands of anyone who saw me as a problem instead of a person. Rachel turned those wishes into shapes on paper. She spoke quietly with the bank officer, using words like trust and distribution and protections. I did not catch every detail, but I watched their faces and their pens. I saw that they understood I was not asking how to squeeze the last cent from this prize. I was asking how to stop it from destroying what little was left of my peace. They did not ask me to choose numbers or percentages in front of them that second. Most of that work Rachel had already sketched out based on our talk the week before. Instead, they slid pages toward me one by one. Each page had a small flag where I was meant to sign or write my initials. I went slowly, reading at least the sentences around each mark. If I did not understand, I asked. Rachel never rushed me. As I signed, I felt something shift again. It was not the ugly rush of greed or that wild excitement I had seen in Emily's eyes. It was the opposite, a kind of calm weight, the feeling of bricks being laid into a wall that would stand long after I was gone. When it was over, the bank officer gathered the papers into a neat stack. He said there were still steps to complete, but that the foundation was there. In the days ahead, money that did not yet exist in my accounts would have a clear path when it arrived. It would not just spread into random hands. I left the bank with a thinner folder than I had expected. Rachel kept most of the papers, and the bank kept copies. What I had was mostly a summary, some business cards, and a few sheets with simple language explaining the next steps. It did not look like much, but I knew what it meant. At home that night, my kitchen felt different, even though nothing had changed. The same cheap light fixture hung over the table. The same old fridge hum filled the room. Yet the chair where I sat now felt like part of a new map instead of an old loop. I made myself a bowl of soup and ate it slowly. Then I cleared the table and took out a small lined notebook from the drawer. It was the kind kids use for school. I had bought a pack once when my granddaughter stayed over, and one was still left. I opened it and stared at the blank page for a long time. Rachel had told me that there would likely be a short speech at the lottery event. I could say nothing and just smile for the cameras, but if I wanted to say something, this was my chance. She had advised me to keep it simple and to remember that whatever I said would go further than I could imagine once the video hit the internet, so I started with the easiest part. I wrote a few sentences about my wife, about how we had joked for years about a lucky ticket, and how the habit had become something I did to feel close to her after she passed. I kept the language plain. I did not want a script. I wanted a guide. Then I wrote about work. I mentioned the warehouse only in my mind, but on the page I used words like long shifts, steady hands, tired feet. I thought of all the people like me who would watch a clip of some older man holding a fake check and think he had just gotten lucky. I wanted at least one line that said I knew the value of money because I knew the price of earning it. When I reached the part about family, my hand paused. I could have used those lines to lash out. I could have written the exact words my daughter had used in the restaurant and on the rooftop. I could have planned a public punishment. Instead, I wrote that I was grateful to the people who had stood by me without asking for anything. I wrote that money did not change who loved you, it just showed you who actually did. That was enough. The rest could stay between us, even if the results would not. I did not write Emily's name in that notebook. I did not write Tyler's either. I preferred to let silence do that work. When I was done, I closed the notebook and slid it under a stack of old bills on the kitchen counter. I did not want to stare at it. I wanted it close, but not too visible, like a thought I might return to in the morning when my head was clear. The next day, in the middle of my shift, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it during a quick break. It was a number I did not recognize. I answered anyway, stepping into a quieter corner of the break room. The woman on the other end introduced herself as someone from the state lottery office. Her voice was bright in that formal way, but there was warmth under it. She said they had my claim on file and that everything looked in order. She said they were planning the public announcement and wanted to confirm some details. She asked if I wanted to appear in person or keep things low-key. I told her I would appear. She asked if I wanted to name any family members or others to stand with me on stage. I hesitated and then told her that my daughter and her husband might attend, but that I was not sure who would be on the stage itself. I said we could treat them as guests for now. She understood. She said they could reserve seats for family in the front row and that the cameras would do what cameras always do. She explained the date and time of the event, what to wear, when to arrive. I wrote it all down on a piece of scrap paper from my pocket. At the end of the call, she reminded me that, until the event, I should not give detailed statements to anyone else about the prize. She said people would talk anyway, but that the official story would start on their stage when my name was read. I thanked her and hung up. That evening, I finally texted Emily about the announcement. I told her the lottery wanted to do a small ceremony and take a family photo. I said she and Tyler were invited and that it could be a nice memory for all of us. I did not mention stage positions or bank meetings or trust papers. Her reply came fast. She said, in excited words, that of course they would be there. She said they had already told coworkers and friends to watch. She wrote that this was their moment and that everyone would finally see how far they had come. There was no mention of me beyond a quick note that I should wear something nice. Over the next days, small hints of their plans floated across my screen. Emily sent pictures of outfits she was thinking of wearing, asking what I thought. Tyler posted vague messages on social media about big changes coming and people needing to be ready for success. In a private message to me, he reminded me not to make things weird at the event. He wrote that the main thing was to show a united front and not bring up old stuff. I did not argue. I simply told him I would be calm and that I understood the importance of staying within the rules. I left it at that. The night before the ceremony, I went through a quiet routine. I laid my only good suit out on the bed. It was dark and a little shiny from age, but it was clean. I shined my shoes until they looked almost new. I took the fireproof box from its hiding place and opened it. The ticket was there, in its plastic sleeve. I took it out and looked at it one more time. The numbers on the front had not changed. My name on the back had not faded. I held it gently, then slid it into a thin envelope and placed that envelope inside a plain manila folder along with a few other papers Rachel had given me. I did not need to understand every form to know they were all pointing in the same direction. In the morning, I woke up before my alarm. The house was very still. I made coffee, but I could not drink more than a few sips. My stomach felt tight, like it did on the day Emily was born. I put on my suit and stood in front of the small mirror in my bedroom. The man looking back at me had gray hair and lines on his face, but his eyes were clear. He did not look like someone who had no say in his own life. In the living room, the TV was on low. A local news anchor was talking about the upcoming lottery announcement. They showed a generic picture of a winning ticket and an older couple from some past year smiling with their big check. The anchor said they would soon reveal the newest winner live from the state lottery headquarters. I glanced at the screen, then down at the manila folder in my hand. The edges pressed into my fingers. Inside that folder, unseen, were the proof and the plans that would decide what happened when the cameras turned. I turned off the TV, picked up my keys, and walked to the front door. The lobby of the lottery headquarters buzzed when I walked in. Emily and Tyler were already there in new clothes, posing for selfies under the logo. They waved me over like a supporting actor. I just nodded and checked that the folder in my hand was closed. Inside the press room, rows of chairs faced a podium. Nora, the lottery official, greeted me, checked my ID, and took the envelope with the ticket and documents. Cameras began to warm up. Emily whispered that this was their moment, and to please not talk too long. When it started, Nora thanked everyone, then read from a sheet. She announced the winner by full legal name, mine, David Miller. Cameras shifted toward me. Emily and Tyler went pale. On stage, I held the microphone and spoke quietly. I said the ticket was mine, the prize was going into a trust, and I would not fund anyone who had already said they did not need me. Later, as reporters circled me, I saw security politely guiding Emily and Tyler away from the media area. I walked out holding the thin folder, and for once, nobody was pulling anything out of my hands.